How's it going, everybody? And welcome back to another pool coaching video. Today, I'd like you to meet Tim. Now, he comes to us as an already established APA league player with a skill level of 3, and he wanted to see what type of advice I can give him to help improve his game. So he's provided us 2 racks of 8 ball that we're going to watch, and just like before, at the end of each rack, I'll go back to what I think are key areas where I can hopefully offer him some type of advice that'll help improve his game. So let's get started. Okay, Tim, let's see what you got in this first rack. Okay, a pretty solid head-on break. Unfortunately, we didn't make anything. So let's see what your opening shot is going to be as player 2. What's this music I'm hearing in the background? I can hear some wind chimes and like a constant humming. I almost feel like meditating. It's very calm and peaceful. I like it. Okay, good shot. Player 2 is going to be solids, making player 1 stripes. Oh, that was unfortunate. Okay, so with ball in hand, back to player 1, what is going to be the first stripe that you're going to try to pick off? I don't think that would be the first ball I would choose. Usually I advise for you to figure out which ball is the hardest to play position on. And since you have ball in hand, start at that ball instead. You're about to change your mind? There we go. That is the ball that I would start with first. What are we about to do here? Ah, good bank shot. Okay, good shot there, but I don't think that's where you wanted the cue ball to end up. It looks like you wanted to try to hit the 10 ball. What are you going to do here? Okay, sizing up for the 13 ball in the side pocket. Nicely done. Can we see the 9 ball though? It's obvious we can't see the 10 ball because the 8 ball is blocking it. But what about the 9? Doesn't look like it. Looks like you're going to try to kick at it. Okay, good hit. Almost a good safety. Player 2 can at least see the 6 ball. Okay, good shot. Hey, that'll work. Little assistance from the 5 ball there. No big deal. Okay, good position on the 1. Okay, cue ball rolled away a little bit, but we can still see the 8 ball. Okay, 8 ball, lower right corner pocket. Nicely done. Wow, you were able to do that rack in just 1 inning. That's actually really good for a skill level 3. We do have some areas that I saw during the course of that rack that I can offer some type of advice, so let's go back and take a look at them. So this is the first spot I wanted to comment on. This is your break, which has been a very common starting point for me when I do these reviews. With your break, we can see that you lose control of your cue as it leaves your bridge hand, especially since you're using an open hand V bridge. And your follow through is long enough to where your cue starts to veer off to the left instead of going straight through the cue ball. Now, since your cue veers off this far, I have to ask you, do you know when your cue starts to veer off? Because with this much movement, it is quite possible that you're doing it before you hit the cue ball, which means you're unintentionally going to be putting left spin on the cue ball. Now, when it comes to braking, I do try to advise that you always have more control over your brake than you do power. And with your brake, the simplest things I can suggest to regain control of your break is one, don't use an open hand V bridge. Instead, use the closed hand bridge because your cue cannot leave your bridge hand unless you let go. And then the second thing I can advise is don't follow through so far. Treat the break shot like you would a regular shot and just have a normal follow through, which is going to give you a good clean hit on the cue ball. Now you're probably going to ask, well, where do I get the power from? Well, for now, get control first. Because after you get control of your break, then you could start to work in power by just swinging faster. But you don't want to swing faster to the point to where you start to lose control again. So I'm asking you to pull it back some, get control first, and then slowly but surely try to add the power back in. This is the next spot I wanted to comment on. You had just previously scratched as player 2, and now with ball in hand as player 1, you decided to start with the 15 ball, which is the best ball to start with, because in my opinion, it's the hardest ball to get position on. And since you have ball in hand, you can take it out right now. And you had elected to shoot the 15 ball into the corner pocket, and you drew back for position on the 14 ball into the corner pocket. Your cue ball rolled a little bit this way, and I think it bumped into the 10 ball, and you had to bank the 12 ball into the cross corner pocket, which was a really good shot. Your cue ball knocks the 1 ball out of the way, and you get position on the 11 ball. And then from the 11 ball, I think you missed the position that you were wanting because your cue ball comes over here and lands right around here to where you had to cut the 13 ball into the side pocket, and then your cue ball rolls up and your run ends because you had to kick the 9 after that. Now, the only issue that I have with this particular route that you have is all that controlling you had to do on the cue ball and how much movement there was on the cue ball because of that. When I work with lower level skilled players, I always try to advise them to not control the cue ball. Just allow the cue ball to do what it naturally wants to do, and that's just roll across the table, which usually means you're just doing a center ball hit. Sometimes they might do a slightly above center hit if they don't want the cue ball to slide across the table. They'll just have it rolling forward. Because they have to be able to know where the cue ball is going to end up after that. Because if they don't know that, then there's no way that they're going to be able to control the cue ball where they want it to go. So with that being said, this is what I advise you could have done in this position here with ball in hand that requires less cue ball movement and it's easier to control. Pull the cue ball back a little bit farther and then just shoot the 15 ball in ever so gently, and your cue ball should either stop or just gently roll forward and replace it somewhere right around here. Now, instead of banking the 12, you just have to shoot it in. No big deal there. Your cue ball rolls forward again just a little bit, and then you have a straight shot on the 14 ball. And look, all you're doing here is just pushing the cue ball forward every single solitary time. Now, on the 11 ball, this is what I think you wanted to do. You could have just shot it into the side pocket and just have your cue ball just roll over here. This is where you'd end up playing a stop shot. Now you have the 9, and then you have the 8 in the side, and the rack is over. The biggest difference that you see with this type of run out versus the run out that you tried is the cue ball isn't really even moving anywhere. All it's doing is just rolling forward. And the biggest reason why I advise that is because since you were trying to control the cue ball around, it makes me feel that you're not completely aware of where the cue ball goes by itself with just natural rolling of the cue ball. So I would advise that you try to do something like this more often so that you can learn where the cue ball goes all by itself without controlling it. Because if you're aware of where the cue ball is going to go by itself, you'll know if you have position on another ball, but then you'll also know that if you don't have position, then you have to help it with a little bit of control, whether you're putting top spin, bottom spin, left spin, or right spin. But first, learn where the cue ball goes all by itself with just a center ball hit, and maybe you can even use just a slight above center hit. It's really not that big of a deal. But learning where that cue ball goes all by itself, I think will be crucial for you to learn because then it'll be easier for you to control the cue ball in the future. At this point here, I want you to watch and see how unsure you are of yourself when you're setting up for the 6 ball. Because when you got down on the shot, I counted at least 3 noticeable adjustments. Watch what I'm talking about. 1, 2, and then 3 when you moved your bridge hand. Now you made the shot and you got position on the next ball, which is good. But all that adjusting that you did while you're down on the shot shouldn't be there. Is it really that big of a deal? No, because you made the shot. But do you do adjustments like this on every single solitary shot that you do? If the answer is no, then you need to find where in your pre-shot routine to make it consistent. Like I demonstrated in my pre-shot routine, most of my aiming is done while I'm standing lining up the shot. Because from a standing position, you should be able to see whether or not if you're going to make the shot. Because then when you finally get down on the ball, you should be able to see if you're actually going to make it and then only have to make really small adjustments that shouldn't really be that noticeable on camera or to just the human eye. So next time, whenever you find yourself down on the ball and you feel yourself actually moving that big or you have to move your bridge hand, just stand back up and start all over with your pre-shot routine. And this is the final spot in rack one that I wanted to comment on with regards to the placement of your grip hand. Normally, when the tip of your cue is this close to the cue ball, your grip hand should be right underneath your elbow like this. And we can see that your grip hand is actually behind your elbow. And that will most likely cause some sort of shoulder rotation when you actually perform your backstroke. And you don't want that shoulder rotation to be in your stroke at all. Which is why when your grip hand is directly below your elbow, when you're this close to the cue ball, you now have more than enough room to be able to perform a backstroke and a forward stroke with follow through and have no shoulder rotation at all. And that's going to allow you to be more accurate at where you're actually going to hit the cue ball, especially if you're trying to apply any type of spin to the cue ball. So whenever you're down on a shot and you get this close to the cue ball, check to see where your grip hand is at. And if it's not underneath your elbow, then move it to where it's going to be underneath your elbow and then take a few more practice strokes before you finally take the shot. So this is what I have for you in rack one that I hope you can find helpful. Let's move on over to rack two. So here we are with rack two, and you're going to be breaking as player two since player two won the previous rack. Now, it did take you some time to get through this rack here, so in the essence of saving some time, I am going to speed up the progress of the play. So let's go. Okay, we have a dry break, so let's see what player one starts with. Looks like you tried a 7-4 combination there. Okay, player two is going to be stripes. Okay, nice try there. I think you were trying to back cut the 15 ball into the corner pocket. Probably could have gotten a little help from the 11 ball there. We just didn't cut it enough. Nice shot there to help put the two ball more out into the open. I guess that room is a little too small for that table, huh? I think that's the second time I've seen you switch to a smaller cue. Good attempt on a bank shot there, even with a smaller cue. Ooh, just barely. A little bit of an undercut there. Nicely done. Another good attempt. Just barely missed the bank. I think at this point, I'm starting to wonder, what are you going to do with the 8 ball? Like, how are you going to free it from the 7 ball if you plan on running out stripes? Oh, just barely. That was a really good run, though. Whoops. Looks like you're bumping into the camera there. Oh, almost ended it. Excellent bank shot. You're going to have to do it again. Okay, cross corner. Oh, and just barely missed it. This should pretty much end it. Cool. So this rack here took you 6 innings to finish, where the previous one only took you 1 inning. We got quite a few spots to go through that I'd like to give you some advice on, so let's go and take a look at them. Here's the first spot in rack 2 that I want to make a comment on. This is the opening shot that you took after breaking dry, and you're now shooting as player 1. And it looks like you were trying to play a combination where you take the 7 ball to go off the rail because the 15 ball is blocking a direct path, and then combo the 4 ball into the corner pocket. I'm surprised that I didn't see you at least look at the 5 ball, the 13 ball, or the 2 ball. The 5 ball can go into this corner pocket. The 13 ball can also go into this corner pocket, while the 2 ball goes into this corner pocket. These shots are difficult from this position. I just don't think they're as difficult as this off the rail combo that you were trying to do on the 4 ball. Nonetheless, with an open table here, I think stripes is probably the best set to choose from, to where I would have probably have started with the 13 ball and then have your cue ball come over here for position on either the I think this is the 12 ball or even the 11 ball, while the 9 also has a path to go here to the side pocket, depending upon which ball you take out next. The point being is that just because the 4 ball is the closest to the pocket doesn't necessarily mean that it's the correct shot to take. So before you attempt to shoot at your first ball, just be aware of what all the options are on the table, especially since you have an open table. Some shots might look a little bit more difficult, but at least the 3 options that I'm presenting here, I just don't think they're as difficult as this combo that you started with or tried to start with. Here's the next spot I want to comment on. This is the next shot that you had taken right after missing the 7-4 combination. And now, as player 2, you decided to shoot the 10 ball into the corner pocket. You just hit the cue ball too hard because your cue ball comes over here off the side rail and then buries up next to the 15 ball, where you had to try to back cut it into this corner pocket and you just didn't cut it enough. Had you just hit the cue ball softer, your cue ball would have just landed pretty much right where the 10 ball's at or just a little bit closer, but you would have had an easier shot on the 15 ball. This is something that I pretty much saw all through rack 1, and it is apparent even through rack 2, to where you're just a little heavy-handed on some of your shots. So that goes back to the principle of what I was saying about just pushing the cue ball around and getting familiar with where the cue ball will go after it makes contact with an object ball. So more times than not, just hit the cue ball a little bit softer, and you'd be surprised how soft you can actually hit the ball to get a ball to go in and get position on the next ball. Nonetheless, this is not the first ball I would have chosen to shoot at if you were choosing stripes. I would have chosen the 14 ball first because of the principle of being able to deal with the table in sections. Even if you were successful at making the 10 ball and getting position on the 15 ball, when do you plan on coming down here for the 14 ball? Maybe after the 9 ball, maybe after the 11 ball, who knows? The point being is, if you were to shoot the 14 ball now and just either draw the cue ball back or just stop the cue ball, now you're done with this half of the table and you only have to deal with this half of the table, which means your cue ball movements are going to be really small to where you can literally just push the cue ball around and try to get position on the next ball. So when you're able to do so by dealing with the table in sections, try to do so that way your cue ball movements can actually stay small and you don't really have to worry about trying to control the cue ball all over the table. At this point in the rack, you had played the 6 ball into the corner pocket, and I think you were trying to get your cue ball to come 2 rails to get position on the 3 ball here into this corner pocket. You just didn't hit the cue ball hard enough because your cue ball stopped right around here to where you had to try to bank the 7 ball into the cross-side pocket. Now, from this camera angle that you've given me, it does look like that the 3 ball can go straight into this corner pocket, even though the 15 ball does look like it's in the way. I don't think it actually is because of where the 3 ball is actually at. The 7 ball, on the other hand, is blocked by the 15 ball. That is pretty apparent. You can see here. Now, this is where the camera angles are always important to show me what you can and cannot do. And even though the 3 ball looks blocked, I don't think it actually is. So this tells me that you really just had to just shoot the 6 ball into the corner pocket and just have the cue ball just roll forward to where you're straight in on the 3 ball to go into this corner pocket. You can then let your cue ball roll forward and get position on the 7 ball, or go further to get position on the 2, whichever would be your choosing. The point being is that when you're going to choose what the next ball is you're going to do, especially when you know where the cue ball can go or where you can make it go, do be aware of all the possible pockets that the next ball can actually go in, and then obviously pick the one that's actually easier to get to. Now, it's not like doing this was actually that difficult. You just didn't hit it hard enough. But since this cue ball movement here is much smaller, it's just easier to accomplish. Here's another spot like in rack 1 where you show how unsure you are of yourself when you're lining up for that 3 ball. Because I want you to pay close attention and watch what you do when you're bridging over this 7 ball. There, you've already touched the 7 ball with your stick. Then you move your hand closer and closer and touch the 7 ball twice with your hand. So that shows us all this movement that you're actually doing when you're down on the ball. And like I said in rack 1, when you get down on the shot, the movements that you have to do or any adjustments that you have to do should be really, really small to where you can't hardly even see them on camera, especially if you're going to have to bridge over a ball. The main thing that you want to do is set your bridge hand down, put your cue onto your bridge hand, and see that you are clearing over that 7 ball without touching it. And then, of course, making sure that you don't have any of that shoulder rotation that I had talked about so that your cue can just go straight back and straight forward and not touch the 7 ball with your cue or with your hand. And if you feel like you have to do a big movement, then you get back up and then place your bridge hand back down again first, then the cue, and then make sure that you're clearing over the 7 ball without touching it. So always try to make sure that when you settle into the shot, when you're down on the table, try not to move at all or very little if you absolutely have to. And this is the final spot in rack 2 that I want to talk about because I can show you the idea of being able to break apart clusters in order to help you finish the table. Because at this point here, you had heard me say, what are you planning on doing with the 8 ball being tied up next to the 7 ball? Because here at this point, you shot the 11 ball into the corner pocket. I think this is your 12 ball. It went into the side pocket. You shot the 14 ball into the corner pocket, and then you tried to shoot the 9 ball into this corner pocket. You just missed, and your cue ball landed somewhere right around here. But what would you have done had you made the 9 ball? There's no real shot that you can do here since that 8 ball is tied up next to the 7 ball. And that's why when you identify what I like to call a trouble spot, you want to try to deal with it as soon as possible and not leave it towards the end. Because if you have to try to come up with something at the end and you mess up, then chances are you're giving a great opportunity for your opponent to be able to win the game. So at this point here, it does look like you can shoot the 9 ball into this corner pocket and then just stun your cue ball over here to where hopefully you can get the 8 ball to break apart from the 7 ball. Yes, this is a harder shot to make than shooting the 11 ball, but the reward that you can get from taking this type of risk is worth it because then you have the opportunity to win the game. And actually, this is not the only spot that you had to be able to try to break out the 8 ball. You actually had another one on the previous shot right here. Because when you shot the 13 ball into the corner pocket, you drew the cue ball back, and that's where you ended up being next to, again, I think that's your 12 ball, and then you shot the 11 and ran out the rest of your pattern. If you're able to draw the cue ball into this position, you can also send the cue ball into this position here and try to break apart the 8 ball, and then your 9, your 12, your 11, or even your 14, they at least serve as a backup. And that's why I always try to suggest that if you're able to identify a trouble spot, try to deal with it as soon as possible. And the more balls that you have on the table, they're going to be able to serve as backup balls just in case something goes wrong. And that's going to do it for these 2 racks. Now, as a skill level 3, I thought you still played really well. Your first rack was just awesome. It was that second rack that gave you the most problems. The biggest thing that I think you should work on is slowing your pace down when you line up for a shot. That way, when you get down on the shot, you won't have to make those really big adjustments that I pointed out in both of the racks. You should also work on understanding where the cue ball naturally goes without hitting as hard as you did and without trying to control it. The majority of the shots that you attempted looked like you were always trying to control where you wanted that cue ball to go. And it's of my opinion that if you're always having to control the cue ball to get to the next ball, instead of having some sort of position where the cue ball will naturally get positioned on the next ball, then you're not really playing good pool. Once you learn where the cue ball can naturally go, you can then determine if you're already going to have position on the next ball, or you might actually have to help it a little with some type of spin on the cue ball, or you might have to hit harder or softer, or a combination of both. And then when you're able to get those 2 things down, you'll find that you won't have to work as hard to be able to run a string of balls together. So Tim, let me say thanks for giving me the opportunity to be able to review your game. I hope that you're able to find these comments and suggestions useful to help improve your game. And for the viewers, if you find that you're having similar issues, then hopefully these comments and suggestions can help you out as well. Now, if any of y'all saw something else that you think Tim could work on, or if you saw another option that he could have taken during the course of these 2 racks, feel free to leave a comment in the comment section below with the timestamp of the shot and the other option that you think that he could have done. And as always, if you like what you saw, give this video a thumbs up and don't forget to subscribe. Take care, everybody.